All right, welcome back into another edition of Sports Spotlight. I am Sports Director Alex Eisman, as always, joined by reporter DeShawn Johnson. And it's March, so we're going to be talking about some basketball here. And in particular, to start off, we're right in the middle of high school playoffs for boys and girls basketball here. Boys getting ready for states this weekend. Girls just wrapping up regionals last night. We've actually had back-to-back nights now of getting to see a buzzer beater. So DeShawn, we'll go with the most recent one first. DeShawn, tell me a little bit about the Goodrich game you were at last night.
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously, talking about buzzer beaters, a down to the wire matchup. They took on, a very good Hazlitt Vikings squad. And it's kind of funny how we end up getting to a buzzer beater. Goodrich started that game, on a 9-0 run. They came out really strong in that matchup, getting to halftime. They're up 15. And so you're not really thinking, this matchup, I don't know if it's going to be close. There's some space being created here. We get into these last 2 minutes, and that's where things really got exciting in this one. just back and forth, both of these teams constantly going at it. And just setting up the last 20 seconds, Goodrich, it's tied up 56-56. Kayla Hairston, taking one of the biggest defensive plays of the game, takes a huge charge on one of the final plays that Hazlitt tries to put up, gets the ball back into the Martians' hands, and then the rest of it, Baylor Lowinger, dude, the best way that I can explain this, if you're able to go check the highlight that we put out from in yesterday's broadcast, she's surveying the clock. She's obviously taking her time, trying to make sure she gets the very last shot, if not leaving the opponent with almost no time left. She does exactly that. She takes it right up the lane, multiple people crashing down on her, and it doesn't matter. Gets the shot to go. Leaving the Vikings with less than 2 seconds to go, they don't get the opportunity to get up a really good shot. And just like that, Goodrich, they continue to move on. It was just the energy, the excitement, seeing the shot go in. It was, I honestly, like myself just sitting there on the baseline, I was shocked.
Yeah, and it's awesome though because we've gotten to see a lot of Goodrich girls basketball this year, and they got some hoopers like you mentioned. Obviously, Baylor Lowinger, what a big time shot from her to get the regional title, send them to the quarterfinals. She's been doing it all year. Kayla Hairston, like you said, mentioned again, has been doing it all year. I think if I remember right, she led them in scoring last night.
She did. Yep, she did. It was a huge game from her. And then, the head coach Jason Gray talked about that. He talked about them putting together, a multiple look play, on that final play. Kayla kind of drew multiple defenders in that situation, and that kind of gave the wide open lane to Baylor. And Coach Gray also talking about, they've got multiple people on this team that can get it done. And the great thing about it is that they're all willing to let anyone else get it done or, just be that team player and do what they have to do to win. It's not any single one of them are worried about being that player. They just know that they're going to need one of those guys, one of them to do that every night.
Yeah, well, in the third player on Goodrich that I want to shout out to is Tanner Schramm, because she's like, she can kind of do it all too. She's a great rebounder, great scorer, great passer. That's a deadly trio that the Martians have got right now. They're taking on Tecumseh in the quarterfinal on Tuesday. Tecumseh, we were looking at earlier, one-loss team, so we're in for another really exciting matchup there. We'll talk about our other girls teams that are still in contention in a little bit, but still on the topic of buzzer beaters. Today's Thursday. Tuesday, Carmen Ainsworth played their quarterfinal game against Byron Center, and Fred Thomas, man, off the glass three.
Oh my gosh.
Like, that place exploded. Like, it was loud when I got there. I'm going to give credit to Byron Center students in particular, because they were making their presence felt for sure. And Carmen had to kind of battle back in that second half too. They were down a little bit, and Thomas not just made the eventual game winner, he beat the buzzer at the end of the third on a three, which was huge. I think that either gave Carmen the lead, helped them draw within one, but it was a momentum shift. They drew it up. It was a given. not a give and go, but he inbounded it, went to Donovan Hamlin, went right back to Fred, and then he just launched the three, and the bank was open. Bank was open. And to be honest, I'm so impressed with Carman Ainsworth and the way that they've showed up these playoffs, because they've avenged a couple losses. They've taken out some teams that they might not have beaten earlier in the season too. It feels like they're just playing their best ball at the right time, and they're kind of showcasing their full potential right now.
And that's exactly what you want to see, from any team right around this time, in basketball. You're in March. This is when everything gets serious, no matter what level you're at. Even going all the way to the professionals, all those guys getting ready for their postseason. Like right around now, and you're talking about basketball, you're looking to see your team put out the best production that they've put all year. And watching the Carman Ainsworth guys, man, you talked about some of them, Hamlin on that squad, Fred Thomas. There's so many of them that, they're a poised squad. Like, I multiple times this year, we've seen them in maybe a deficit or so, but they are so good at taking the momentum in a game and just shifting it. Like a couple of exciting plays. Hamlin, they call, his nickname Hawk Hamlin. There's a reason for that. He's got so much energy, even if he's not going out there and getting a dunk on every other player. So he's taking it to one or two guys down low. You get a couple easy buckets that way. Then you start swinging it out to the paint, and you start swinging it out to the 3-point, and they got so many different guys that are able to produce on that team, knock down shots. And like I said, they're super poised. Like every time this year, I've got to see them, just to close off the regular season and a lot this postseason so far. And just anytime they have stayed focused in the crunch time of their games. And honestly, it's not just in the crunch. From start to finish, they go into these games knowing exactly what they're going to be expecting. They know it's postseason basketball. And like you said, they're putting out their best product right now.
They're playing tomorrow at 2 in the state semifinal, D1 state semifinal at the Breslin Center. They're playing Wayne Memorial. And just kind of in a broader sense, though, this is kind of a murderer's row of a Final Four left in D1, because on the other side, you got the reigning champs in Orchard Lake St. Mary's, of course, the new Michigan Mr. Basketball on there leading them as well.
Yeah.
And then East Lansing, who I know you've gotten to see a couple times from your time at MSU. What's kind of, I'm sure there's a few guys that have graduated since then, but what's kind of your take on in particular East Lansing on that side?
The biggest thing that I've seen just coming out of that program for the last couple of years is that they've got a lot of pure athletes over there, man. Obviously what we've seen the game come to now, and there is a lot of 3-point stuff going on over there, but they've got long, lengthy guys that have no problem getting down low. They're rebounders. Like it's kind of they're very mature athletes, to say the least. Like I said, a lot of these guys, they've had multiple guys playing in the JYBL and everything over there in that program over the past couple of years. So just a lot of those guys are determined and focused. It's not even so much about the skill sets, which they have a lot of. You see, if you check out some of the power rankings with a lot of these Michigan high school teams before the postseason even got started, and seeing what they've been able to put together. A lot of those guys, they're super competitive. Like I said, they're very athletic out there, and it's a lot of what we're seeing with some of the better teams out here now. They've been able to put the best bit of basketball together, and they're focused on at this point. You make it this far, you're trying to make it all the way.
For sure, and I did get to see St. Mary's play once this postseason when they were playing Grand Blanc. I was there for the first half. The first half, Grand Blanc battled with them, and it was tight, but they ended up just running away with it. And I think, when you have a guy like Trey McKinney, but you also have, this is a big, deep, talented roster that they have with kids who, kind of go in knowing that they're going to play basketball and want to play basketball for St. Mary's. And it feels like it doesn't feel like they already have kind of that championship, the championship mentality from winning it last year. They're obviously going up against a great team in East Lansing. They did beat Wayne Memorial, who's the Cavaliers' opponent tomorrow. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how Carman, should they win, stack up with Orchard Lake St. Mary's if they win. We'll get to kind of compare and contrast those two games. But either way, it's super talented right now in boys D1. Now, last night, back to the girls' side, our other winner that we got to see was Genesee Christian, their second ever regional championship. And this was the game that I was at. You were at Goodrich. I was in Marlett for that game against Kingston, and special player is Haven Chapman. I think she almost dropped a triple-double. She was awesome. She made some huge free throws to kind of ice the game at the end too. And I learned from talking to Jake, their coach, that she has been a part of both regional championships in the school's history.
Wow.
Her freshman year and now her senior year. So she's a baller. We've both gotten to see them play several times this year as well. They got some other shoot. Bella Boyke is another one that she made a big three at the end of the game. They got the freshman, Reagan Gardner, I think her name is.
Mm-hmm.
That was the game you were at where she was knocking down some big threes.
Big threes.
They're a fun team to watch. And I got to double check who they're playing on Tuesday. Morenci. 24-1. Their only loss on the season in a 1-point OT loss.
Wow.
So this is that's how the playoffs are though. Like the further you get, the harder the teams are going to be. And they just took out a Kingston team that was absolutely hooping all season. I think they only had one or two losses heading into that game. So they just kind of slayed a big dragon there. And it's another one coming up. But Genesee Christian, for sure, been a team we've had our eye on all season. And they're showing out for sure.
Yeah, and like just going off of one of those things you mentioned there, I mean, like as you continue to progress, you're going to see the better and the better of these teams. And, so far they've been able to handle everything in front of them in these playoffs. And up until yesterday by some pretty big margins, to be honest. So, I feel like they're seeing a bit of everything so far that, at least as much as you can get throughout this playoff series. You got some games that are a bit of a closer, they're double-digit deficits, but obviously ones that kind of get away towards the end. You got a blowout early to start this week that they had against Waterford, Our Lady of the Lakes. And, that's completely unexpected regardless. I mean, that's a team that's made it this far into the postseason with you. So I don't think you go into the matchup expecting that. And, the good thing is that they're able to turn that right around, kind of not get too big heads about it and come against a really good, a well-battled Kingston team and still put up another 40-point game there and be able to come out with a close win in that one.
That Waterford game was 56-9, right?
56-9 was the final
in the regional semifinal.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Wow.
And that's what I mean. You can't, Our Lady of the Lakes, you can't take them, as no flyby team. They made it to the regional semifinal just like everyone else. And
well, that's why it's so impressive. Is like all the bad teams at this point are kind of weeded out. Right. Like you're in the regionals. Like it's only good teams from there. And yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. And that game on Tuesday will be awesome. Of course, we're gonna be there. We're gonna be there for Goodrich's game as well. Kind of wish Frankie Muth was a little closer. They're playing in Sheboygan, but and their regional was over in Belding. I made it out for the semifinals because they were playing Freeland. Hamity was also there, so it made sense. But regardless, the Eagles, again, another team that we've seen a lot of this year. In the way that region kind of shook out, they split their games with Freeland this year, shut them down on defense in the semifinals. Muth was in a battle that first half, and they elevated in the second half. Then in the regional final, they played Portland, who they dismantled Hamity. And Hamity had put together they hadn't lost since their first game of the year.
Right.
That's 20-plus wins and they just didn't have any answers offensively. And for Muth to go and do what they did to Portland, hold them to 27. I mean, we're seeing they got obviously Claire Konzelman's leading them. She was there during their run a couple years ago when they ended up as runners up, but they got Lucy Konzelman also. Want to shout her out because she's a baller. Their freshman Macy Donovan made some big plays in the Freeland game, knocked down some big threes, made some big layups, played well on defense. And that just a supremely talented team, I think, for Muth. And I'm hoping that we'll get the Muth-Goodrich State semifinal matchup if they both win on Tuesday.
That would be, I mean, like, obviously all these matchups here, they've been super intense and they've been super exciting, but it'd be, I mean, as two teams that we followed kind of along the way and seeing all the work that they've put together, I mean, you talk about the success that Frankenmuth had, and then I was just checking back to kind of count. I was trying to tally everything up. In 2025, Goodrich has lost one single time, like just since the pass of the new year. And so, I mean, like, these teams, it's just so hard. It's hard to even imagine them getting put out. Just imagine them facing each other. I mean, one's got to go. We talk about these moments that got to give. There would be no moment like that. I mean, with these two teams playing together, it would be nothing more than that with two teams battling it out. I mean, they've got depth. A lot of similarities between those teams, and they also both have their own play style. So it'd be a super fun matchup to see. Obviously, that's a little bit down the road, of course, but
yeah, not overlooking the games on Tuesday because they're both big matchups. Muth playing Gladstone, a UP team. You know a little bit. I actually have not seen a UP team play yet in the playoffs since I've been here. You have gotten the opportunity, and you say it's kind of unique being in a gym when a UP basketball team is playing. Yeah.
Well, not only was I just in any gym. I mean, this was at this point. We are in the final couple matches of the tournament. This is, I believe, in 2020. Is it 2022 or 2023? Rockford, they had half the stadium just bright orange. Multiple. I mean, they've got their own special UP Power chants and Rockford chants, and like as someone that's only I've only ever been to the Upper Peninsula a handful of times, and I've definitely never really seen any Upper Peninsula basketball before. Seeing the energy and the excitement that they bring down here, I mean, out to Lansing, and even, we've seen, a couple Rockford crews now just surrounding these playoff series. And I mean, they bring the energy. They love their teams, and obviously their programs have been putting up some these last couple of years have been great years for them as well. But yes, that you cannot slight the Upper Peninsula fan bases at all. They will make the trip, and not only are they going to make the trip, they're going to let you know they're there.
Well, a lot of that you got to give credit to your guy Tom Izzo. He's the one bringing all the Uper pride down to the Lower Peninsula too for the last 20, 30 years. Like,
I mean, it makes sense why they're all avid basketball fans out there. You got a great guy to kind of sway you into the game. But I mean, even then, it's just it's pretty cool to see. Like you think of other places. Like obviously the first one to come to places like the Midwestern places like Indiana, and I mean, like obviously everything that happens in Indiana is basketball. Like they're big basketball people out there, and it's really cool to see. I mean, like you do have a lot of segues to basketball, and here in the Detroit market and stuff like that. But being able to see it come from Upper Peninsulas where people might not think there's as much of that going on. It's super fun to see, and it's different. It's a bit of a unique style. So seeing a lot of these Uper teams kind of make the trip down here and show off their own style of basketball, it's super exciting.
For sure. And speaking of, you got to get up there a little more because in the summer, beautiful. Like the sky, the water, like you do Tequamanon, you do Pictured Rocks, all of that is just like, it's so cool. So highly recommend it. I know this isn't a travel
I will plan
show, but I do love it there. And that's a good segue though into what we're going to talk about next, which is the Big Ten tournament. Michigan State, of course, now the regular season Big Ten champs. Got the 1 seed. They're facing Oregon tomorrow at what, noon, 12:30?
Yep, right around noon.
So yeah, just give me kind of your assessment of that game and what you're expecting out of the Spartans coming up throughout the weekend and throughout the rest of March.
So, just starting off with the game itself, obviously we've seen Oregon, once earlier this year, and I don't want to say like standard or anything. It was kind of, up into these last couple of games, we have seen, a couple of these types of games from Michigan State where they kind of find themselves struggling in the first half, whether it's on the offensive side. I mean, because they've been showing really good defensive showings a lot this year up into that last Iowa game, but it's just they're struggling in these half-court offenses, and you're kind of trying to figure out how they're going to piece it together, and then they come out in the second half. And not only do they piece it together, but they kind of have these random explosions. You talk about like NBA teams being third and fourth quarter teams, obviously no quarters, but they are totally they were totally a second half team for a lot of big moments in this year. And that's exactly what we've seen in this Oregon game before. And I'm not, I don't want to exactly say that I'm looking to kind of recreate that in these kind of games, tournament games, whether it's conference tournaments or you're talking about the NCAA tournament. It is, forget double. It is 3-4 times as harder to come back from these deficits and to kind of, recover from mistakes that you make earlier in these games. That's why you try and get those out of the way earlier in the season. And I think the best kind of thing that we've seen from Michigan State, is to close out the season with 7 straight wins, a lot of ranked opponents throughout that time. And, we talked about it, weeks ago about how tough their schedule finish is going to be. And I don't think either me or you thought it was going to be an undefeated finish for this team. So I think, the best things that we've seen from them, and this kind of speaks to, going through the rest of the tournament, is that I really think, we continue to hit on this note of putting your best basketball out there, right around this time. That's exactly what they've done. They've gotten a lot of their younger guys, and credit to you for saying it, on Digital Desk weeks before. Jace Richardson and the explosion that he's had as an offensive player this year has been, it's been, second to none for this team. So they've got multiple guys contributing. Obviously you finish off the game with the Michigan game, and that just, and you finish that game strong. Obviously all the excitement that happens after the game, but I think that does help in some way play into, there's still there's a lot to do. There's a lot to finish, and they're excited. While of course being happy about, the outright championship as far as, winning the Big Ten, but still, that's not it, and I think this team fully grasped that, and I think they're ready to go. Following the Oregon game, depending on who we play, as far as like potentially, a UCLA matchup, I feel a lot more comfortable with these teams, not having to make the trip. I feel like, we talked about the USC and the UCLA trips earlier in the year. That was the first time this team's made a trip like that, with this whole conference edition stuff. So I think, being in just one place, kind of getting the feel for it with the bye and everything. I hope that this team is just not comfortable where they're at and they're ready to just, go finish and play some basketball.
For sure. Piggybacking on a couple of things you said before we talk about Michigan. One, Jace Richardson playing himself into the top 10 of the NBA draft, I think, right now. He's been just like he dogged Michigan in the first matchup, especially in that second half. He was unguardable. And then that stretch of playing against ranked teams, I actually said it during one of the shows a couple weeks ago. Give me that 4-game stretch up against anyone in the country and show me one better. It's so unbelievably impressive that they were able to come out of that 4-0.
Yeah, no, and that's what I meant. I don't think that, I think in that situation, the best thing, I was hoping ideally, the worst would obviously be to go anything worse than 2-2. I would have probably been like, okay, I get it if this team goes 2-2. Not so much that I didn't have the high expectations, but that's just that's a tough 4-game stretch, and multiple quadrant 1 wins for this team. It's just like if you want to go start looking into some of the the big analytical numbers of teams that are finishing and you're looking at to be a potential contender when we're talking about like Final Fours and stuff like that. Those are the kind of things they do. And obviously there's still a lot, in between where we are now and, this team getting there. But those are the kind of things you want to see as you start reaching these points in the year. And I think they've hit on almost every mark that you can ask for them, especially, where this team has come from this year. Expectations lay before him. There's always big expectations on an Izzo squad, but I don't think, where we are now is exactly where everyone may have thought we would be by the start of the season.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And, you see everyone now talking about how MSU is the Big Ten team that everyone's saying, it has the ability to make a run in March. You kind of look at the rest of the conference. Some teams have been underwhelming. Some teams just haven't been consistent enough to kind of give you that sort of confidence. But MSU has done everything right, and they'll be a tough out for anyone in the tournament. Depending on how they do in the Big Ten tournament, they could end up with a 1 seed. Otherwise, they'll be arguably the strongest 2.
Yep.
So yeah, they're riding high right now. On the opposite trajectory, though, is Michigan, who lost the last 3 games of the regular season, got swept by Michigan State in the regular season,
right,
and went from sole possession of first place to a couple weeks later now holding the 3 seed in the Big Ten tournament and kind of being the team that others would want to face. If you're a lower seed, you want to face Michigan out of those top 4 seeds. So what I'm looking for is just like Michigan needs to get back to organic. Like a lot of what I saw from Michigan was obviously the turnovers. That's been happening all year.
Yeah.
But where things really got different for me is they started forcing shots way more.
Mm-hmm.
Like the shot selection was not. There was no creation. It was always a couple guys in your face, off the dribble, like a step back, just high difficulty shots that they weren't having to take earlier in the season. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that they're going to play Purdue because Purdue's got the player of the year. If USC wins, USC wins. But for now, a couple hours before that game tips off, I'm going to assume Michigan's playing Purdue, a team that blew the doors off of them in Mackey and could have won at Chrysler.
Yes.
Purdue 100% could have won that game. So Michigan's got a tall order ahead of them tomorrow, assuming that Purdue does win. And yeah, I'm just looking for them to slow it down sometimes. Like it feels like they almost get ahead of themselves, and that's why a lot of these turnovers are happening. I'd like to see them slow it down, set it up. Vlad Golden is, despite kind of the struggles of Michigan as a whole, Vlad Golden's been a beast. So I'd like to see the offense set up, get him his touches down low, and just see what happens from there.
I think the biggest thing that I'm probably looking for from the Wolverines, just like from where I've kind of been watching them from all this year, is like, you mentioned, kind of getting ahead of yourselves. And you don't exactly want to blame this team because, going back to the whole expectations thing, I'm not sure. We talked about where people might have had, expectations for Michigan State. Michigan is a whole different conversation as far as, this potential worse the first type thing. And although it doesn't exactly finish that way, the complete turnaround in a program that they've had in a year is, it's huge. And that kind of pressure, it also gets built up fast in situations like that, where you go from, like this team, obviously facing a lot of tough situations last year, new faces, some people kind of still used to this, that all turns around and you're soon to be, depending on how things work out, you kind of got to win out to, hopefully still have a chance for this. You start thinking of these games ahead. Last game of the year is with Michigan State, and forget where, the rankings are, but, the rivalry itself. And then it becomes so much more important than that. There's just a lot of things that, you may be thinking about looking past your next opponent or whatever. So I think this does give Michigan a good chance, still being able to kind of be one of those top 4 slotted teams to take a breather, like you said, slow it down and really be able to just, kind of make a game plan. Go, do what you did against Purdue the last time around up in Chrysler Center. I know, of course, you said that was a game that Purdue never really was out of, but still, you want to see these kind of games from the Wolverines, come in there, and regardless of where you came from last year or even how you finished this year, just play like what do what you did to get you here. You know, I mean, we've seen a lot of high moments from this team early on, and you know, Vlad, you know, you definitely got to do what you said. You got to let him get his points, and then you got to kind of play off that. You know, maybe like you said, kind of get away from such the difficult shots and let Vlad create some of these open shots. You know, let Danny Wolf create some of these open shots. You know, you got two big guys that are really expendable inside that allow guys like Trey and everyone else to get active on the 3-point line. And of course, you know, the biggest thing, just like talking about Michigan State not being able to recover from some of the mistakes they make early on, Michigan is not going to be able to recover from the turnovers and the big mistakes and big games like this. So they just, you know, take a breather, slow down, and really try and come up with a big game plan as you come into, like you said, this the more than likely Purdue matchup.
Yeah, and if they come out tomorrow the way that they've looked in those last 3 regular season games, they probably won't make it out of the first weekend of March Madness, just because you can't afford to take away that many possessions from yourself and give an opposite team that many extra possessions. But like you said, like you kind of alluded to, this team is talented.
Yes,
there is a lot of talent on this Michigan team. It's more just about how are they going to be able to play together. And from listening to Dusty talk to, fortunately for Michigan, he's a guy who has experience going on deep runs in March.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what it takes. He knows what he needs out of these guys. And I think even if Michigan doesn't go all the way in the Big Ten tournament, say they beat Purdue on Friday, play a close game on Saturday or win on Saturday, and then, you know, lose Sunday, right? Like, but at least Michigan is showing that they are competitive, because the last few games the wheels have fallen off, particularly in the second half. So if you can put together 40 minutes of just like good basketball, it doesn't need to be great, but good basketball against some of the top Big Ten teams, then you can start figuring it out again and be able to regroup and see what you did right in the Big Ten tournament and apply that to especially your first 2 games in the NCAA tournament.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah, I for both of these teams, you know, like, I mean, like, I had to be honest and say that, like, you know, I mean, coming in from Michigan State, you do kind of, I think that there's a lot of expectations for them to at least make sure they make it to the final of this Big Ten tournament. It's hard to win, you know, any conference championship. So, like, I don't want to put that on them, but, you know, like, that, you know, but either way, I think it's going to be important for both of these teams, you know, to recognize just how important it is for them to, you know, both of these teams with new faces, you know, in a lot of different areas, you know, really take the experience that you get from these games, you know, that tournament-like experience, these atmospheric games where, I mean, it's going to be tough, you know, I mean, it's going to be a lot of different rotations that you're maybe not used to. You're going to have to play some extra minutes, lose out on a couple extra minutes. It's going to be more intense, whatever the case is. I think it's really important for both of these teams to take that experience and not only, you know, like try and build and of course go for a Big Ten championship, but utilize that in their next journey as both these teams prepare for, you know, March Madness, the NCAA tournament.
For sure. Well, we'll see what happens throughout the rest of this weekend. We'll see where the chips fall in terms of Michigan and Michigan State seeding, Michigan and Michigan State's Big Ten postseason tournament championship. See if there is going to be another banner hung between one of the two. That's all we got. Of course, excited to watch Carmen play tomorrow at the Brez. Excited to see how the rest of the girls' high school tournament finishes up next week. 3 mid-Michigan teams still alive: Frankenmuth, Goodrich, and Genesee Christian, if you're looking for a rooting interest in these playoffs. But that's all I got. You good?
If you miss any of this stuff, it'll be in the newsletter. That's about all I got. You know, like, we'll be putting that out this weekend for the first time. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. So, you know, of course, if you can't see it all, we'll be getting ready to put that sports newsletter together. So that's about it. That's all I got.
All right. Great call, DeShawn, on the newsletter. Way to plug that. We'll see you again soon.